So I actually need to explain a little bit of the title. In computer engineering in particular, with logic gates, there's this notion of how many inputs a gate can take and how many outputs it can drive. So the fan in is the number of inputs it can take, and the fan out is the number of different outputs it can drive. So I was trying to come up with a title that my ECE colleagues would understand. And when I say fan in and fan out to them, they all go, mm-hmm. And actually the NSF, when they awarded it, they said, you have to change the title because nobody knows what that means. But inside the department, I use that all the time because they totally get it. So what this is about is trying to make ECE open to a wider range of students and send them off and prepare them for a wider range of careers. So a little bit about the NSF's RED program. So RED stands for Revolutionizing Engineering Departments. They're 5-year grants, $2 million. The PI has to be a department head. So Luke, my department head in ECE is the PI. The team also has to have an engineering education expert. That's Lisa McNair from Engineering Ed and ICAT Playdate. And then we also have to have a social scientist. In our case, it's Matt Wisnowski from STS. Okay? So those are the requirements for the NSF. The expectation is it's going to educate inclusive communities of engineering students, weave technical and professional threads across the 4 years, be scalable and adaptable nationally, and develop and engage the entire faculty. They're not curriculum redesign grants. They're actually changing the culture of departments is what they're meant to do. Okay? Now ours does involve a lot of curriculum redesign, but we're trying to shift faculty perspectives at the same time. So the underlying question is, how do you radically redesign an undergraduate curriculum in a department that's got 1,100 undergraduates, over 120 faculty, who are very interested in research dollars and departmental rankings, so they're much more interested generally in graduate students and PhDs and getting money. And the fact that the curriculum hasn't changed in over 30 years, and I've got evidence for that thanks to Matt Wisnowski. I'll show you in a second, okay? And do it, get all those changes through governance, okay? At the same time that you're shifting faculty perspectives on what it means to be a successful student. At the risk of vastly oversimplifying, a lot of my colleagues think that our students all go to grad school. The numbers say 10% of them go to grad school, okay? So they tend to be training themselves, but 90% of the students don't look like them, or me. And then do it in such a way that students can tailor their courses to their own professional goals. I'm not going to show you what the old program looked like, but basically once a student picked either electrical engineering or computer engineering, they were locked into 14 or 15 courses until they were seniors. They had 0 choices. And we tried to turn that around so that they got all their common coursework out of the way by the end of their sophomore year, and then they choose a bunch of different branches to go on. So that's the problem. So I said I had evidence for this, and again, thanks to Matt Wisnowski. So this is our, one of the first things Matt did was go over in the library and look up old check sheets. So this was the course catalog from 1989. Now the laser's not working. So this is the course catalog from 1989. That's the course catalog when we started in 2016. It's almost exactly the same, except for these 2 courses down the bottom. And you notice 2 courses went away. One of those was a humanities elective. So less choice, okay? He actually went all the way back to 1970 or 71 when we were still on quarters. And if you take into account the difference between quarters and semesters, it looks the same in 1970. Okay. So our vision is to transform the department from one where students have these 2 narrow curricular paths to one where they have a lot of different pathways to a degree and where they can choose their own preparation for a career that's broader than just I'm going to sit in the back of the lab and do these sort of narrow things, but might touch on things that need ECE but aren't directly in ECE. Okay. So make them more T-shaped. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa.
How do I advance?
That's advanced.
Okay. Good morning. Thanks, Tom. Can y'all hear me? Yes, I can hear me. So the vision took form in a lot of different projects. Some were in the proposals, some emerged organically. The first, creating a universal sophomore program was our first sort of open up the black box and make it easier for students to have more time to make a decision on what their emphasis in their ECE major would be, and also to select from different pathways toward that major and toward that degree through different majors and even in some instances create their own majors. So that was a big project, as Tom described. We also had a graduate student, Annie Patrick, who was in STS, and she did a couple of projects that re-envisioned and recommunicated the way that people got to an ECE degree. So the helping our students learn about career paths, she interviewed many of our alumni who had taken non-traditional pathways from ECE degrees into non-traditional sorts of careers, for example, fashion design. And the Engineering Visibility podcast, we're also looking at different kinds of students who are less visible, less typically represented in terms of what an ECE person is. In engaging the present and future engineers through service learning, that was a project, and Chelsea Lyles is in the back, that Chelsea started, which was an undergraduate course, and this was in the proposal to think about how can we engage undergraduate ECEs in their own major and in their own professional identity by teaching and sharing that with others in outreach situations. So the service learning course that Chelsea has developed has undergraduates working with community members in schools and informal learning settings on community projects, service learning projects. And then to make sense of all of this, we had many tools. Some came from design, such as personas. Others came from engineering education, such as curricular complexity and ECE also. And then threshold concepts is an older sort of educational sort of theory about how different kinds of learning have different sorts of difficult pathways. And so getting to that threshold and getting beyond the threshold of difficult concepts takes different time periods and different pathways for different people. And our team grew. So originally we had several co-PIs that were kind of prescribed to us, and things shifted. So Ben Knapp was on the original PI team. He's the director of ICAT and also an affiliate in ECE. TJ Kuntz is our newest member. He's here as well. He's an engineering education PhD student. Chelsea Lyles, mentioned earlier, from SUNY, and she has a background in higher education and policy as well. Liesl Baum joined us very early, thank goodness, and she has been from SUNY long ago and now is in the Center of Excellence in Teaching and Learning and does a lot of work for us there. Matt Wisnowski was a co-PI, and Annie Patrick, his grad student who graduated in December and is now working with another RED team at Georgia Tech. And David Reaping and Dasin Ozcan were PhD students from engineering education who were in at various times throughout the project.
Thanks, Lisa. And actually, I should say we had Steve Harrison from CS, and Andrea Schumann is another grad student from engineering ed on the project right now, too. So one of the things we wanted to do was create these multiple pathways to an ECE degree. And so the idea was we wanted to attract and retain a broader range of students. So we wanted to attract students who saw ECE as fitting into a bigger piece of the puzzle as opposed to just staying narrowly within that. And others, we looked at some of our aspirational peers, and they appealed to those students very well. We didn't do such a good job with our old degree. We also wanted to prepare those students for a wider range of careers and give them, like I said, more choice in their professional preparation. Another thing was there was sort of this known thing nationally where students get open-ended design their freshman year in engineering, and in their senior year and the sophomore and junior year, they're just slogging through a check sheet. So we wanted to introduce more open-ended design throughout the 4 years. And the final thing is, in order for this to really be changing the department culture, we didn't want it just to be the folks who were on the proposal doing all the changes. We proposed a participatory design process of faculty, students, and staff so that the changes weren't just us dictating to the department, but were actually coming up through the department itself. So this new program structure that we came up with has a common, it used to be there was one course in common between the two degrees in the freshman year, and then after that, all the courses were different. So the student has to make this choice at the end of actually midway through their freshman year, which degree it was. We changed that so there's a common freshman and sophomore year. All the courses are the same. After that, they get to choose a major within ECE. Virginia Tech is a little weird. They actually distinguish between your degree program, which is your BS in electrical engineering, your BS in computer engineering, and your major. So we've defined 14 majors within ECE that a student can choose from. And then they have a secondary focus for breadth. And in doing this, we actually found some courses that everybody said, oh, because of accreditation, you have to have these. And it turns out we haven't needed to have those since the 80s. So we found 2 or 3 courses that could be turned into truly free electives for students to choose from across the whole university. And then finally, a 2-semester senior design sequence for the whole department. The other thing is the secondary focus, we created an option where a student who wanted to do something that was ECE plus something else could use, with departmental approval, could come up with 3 courses outside of ECE to use for their secondary focus. So that allows them, essentially, it used to be if they wanted to do a minor, it would take them, they would have to have all those credit hours on top of their ECE credit hours. Now they can use some of their minor classes to count toward their ECE degree. And in the very first cohort, I should say, the first cohort of students is graduating this semester through this new program. In that very first cohort of students, without any seniors to show them how this works, fully a quarter of them have taken advantage of this individualized plan for the secondary focus. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the things they chose for that secondary focus. So biomedical engineering, actually a lot of students choose green engineering, cinema, music technology, astrophysics, Chinese math. Real estate was the one when I looked at what we have them do is write a narrative about how this fits into their career goals. And so they have to be able to explain, this is what I want to do. The real estate one, I went, how's that work? And then when I read the narrative, I'm like, oh, I get that. That makes sense. But I wouldn't come up with it on my own. Okay. So how did we get here? Talking about some of the things that we did. One thing that I've told my faculty, and Luke and I have told our faculty, is we're not giving them a schematic for what the changes are. We're giving them a scaffold, and they have to build within that. So this is the participatory design process that I'm talking about. We didn't say this is what this thing is going to look like. That program structure came out of a working group of faculty looking at programs across the whole country. So it's a scaffold, not a schematic. I'm going to hand it back over to Lisa.
Thanks. So a little bit of, go a little bit deeper. We don't have that much time on some of the things that we were doing in terms of projects. The service learning course really was designed for undergraduates to be engaging in their professional identity, and also to involve CENI, for example, in working with the educational community. And so the community projects that we have work directly with educators and leaders in the school systems, in the museums, and other places in the community to bring ECE to people before they get to college. The podcasts, please look those up on the ICAT website. They're excellent. Annie did a great job of finding people from different backgrounds who are not typically seen in ECE settings, and learned about their experiences firsthand. And she did so much field work along with Matt, interviewing people who were stakeholders across the system, including advisors, other administrators, faculty, students. And Liesl Baum conducted several focus groups with students as well. So we were really focused on getting as many voices into the project as we could. This participatory and data-driven approach was central to everything that we did in the project. So we started with putting faculty groups together and looking at the program structure. And we looked at our program structure, looked at program structures across the country, and looked at how other people were streamlining their curriculum. And we also looked at known bottleneck courses and thought and brought groups together to try to figure out ways that we could inject project-based learning into those courses. People already had ideas, they just hadn't had the opportunity to really formalize them and share them with each other within the faculty. And then we also worked on the base courses and did that in participatory, did we say lock-ins?
No, they weren't lock-ins.
We didn't literally lock them in, but sort of. And Luke Lester, the department head, was here the whole time, really being our cheerleader. And even though department heads were required for every team when we would go to the PI meetings, I always noticed that Luke was the one who was really engaged in the meetings every single Wednesday morning, always behind everything that we were doing with the faculty. And that was a really big component toward our success.
Thanks, Lisa. So I have this slide up there because it comes from one of the working groups of faculty. Rigor always popped to the top of the list of what faculty were interested in. And my role as ICAT, I see this across the whole university. And I think a bigger question for us as educators is faculty's notions of rigor versus what students actually need when they get out. And I don't think those always line up. And it's an ongoing conversation. So I'll just note that. One other thing I want to talk about is in terms of shifting faculty perspectives, we came up with these personas of students who might come through the program. Brad is sort of our known student, comes from Northern Virginia, goes back to Northern Virginia. Students, the faculty know Brad. But we created these other personas based on what I saw at students graduating from our aspirational peers, and then put those in front of the faculty and said, how would those students do in our program? And that was a really sort of provocative moment for a lot of faculty to be thinking about how this particular student might go through with different career goals in mind. So with that, I'm going to hand it over for Luke to talk about a few things we didn't see coming.
So it's not always a bed of roses, right? And we're in year 6 of a 5-year program. We have the no-cost extension. And, so it's got to be 5-6 years to really sustain the vision and to make sure it actually happens. So what were some of those things? And this is getting a little bit down in the weeds, but right in the middle, last academic year, we went from date of graduation in terms of a program to date of entry. And this had the potential to totally mess us up because in terms of curricular radical redesign. Luckily, we dodged a bullet. We still have about 30 or 40 students who are still on the old curriculum. So we're actually carrying 2 curriculums. In this one, then we had, during this, you see this May 2019 article, remember we had a huge pulse of students come through the university. This is disruptive too, because as you're radically redesigning, you would like the student population to be quiet. You would like it to be more constant and that you're not changing too many things at once. So it's a nice problem to have, don't get me wrong. But then what this resulted in is that when we were doing our initial test cases of new courses, we were typically seeing 400 students. We weren't used to that. So you don't want to experiment on students. But the early adopters, these students, these first 400, really taught us how to be nimble and to go quick. And then this should be somewhere around November of 2018, it was announced that Amazon HQ2 was going to locate in Alexandria, or HQ2 in Arlington, Innovation Campus of our university in Alexandria, and pumping a huge amount of money. Another really good problem, okay? I don't want to complain. This is the computer engineering side of the house out of this department. New campus, but a huge new push to boost tech degrees at Virginia Tech. And again, so it's basically putting a finger on the scale saying, yeah, this new curriculum, we're going to take advantage of it, but it's a very large disruptive investment. And you read in the newspaper that all of a sudden your department, another one, we're going to be responsible in part for 25,000 new degrees, and you just go, meltdown. It's like not necessarily a thing a department head wants to see announced in a newspaper and didn't know about it before. Again, a very good problem, but very daunting. And last but not least, I can't remember, oh yeah, duh. I would say the students have been remarkable in their response to the virus and their willingness to work with faculty. That said, we had to do the shift of a new curriculum that was mostly in person, and then we had to overlay it with either hybrid or online. So the pivot for everybody was very rapid, but we were pivoting on a new curriculum as well. So it was super challenging.
Just a little bit more. The next steps are we're trying to make the changes sustainable beyond the end of the grant. So the grant officially ends this summer. So we need to make sure that without the grant there, things keep going on. We're looking for partners both at VT and elsewhere to sort of adapt our changes, and maybe just the process. The changes will be different at two places. And then finally, we really need to focus on the fan-in piece of it. We have things in place now so that students who have these broader interests can come in and be successful, and we have to go out and reach those students and let them know that we're here. So last thing I want to do is say thanks to a lot of people, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to read this whole list, but there's been a whole bunch of people who've helped out, both within VT, folks who from the RED groups across the country. If you're online, thanks for listening to us and giving us your feedback over the years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phyllis.
Thank you. What a great presentation. Thank you so much. Thanks. Big hand. A quick housekeeping, and I'm sorry that some folks online, the way that our video started off, you're in 360, so you can move your screen around if you cannot see the top of the slide. I had that from a couple people. So, questions? And introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Tim Baird. I'm the faculty principal at the Creativity and Innovation District. So thanks for this. This is really great. This seems relevant to every department on campus, maybe. I mean, we should all, I'm in the geography department also, we should all be thinking about how to adapt our curricula to meet the moment, to respond to students' interests and aspirations, et cetera. Do you think that a department, maybe another engineering department, maybe a non-engineering department could do something like this without a $5 million grant? How important is the money? I mean, I know people are responsive to grants.
Yeah.
But this is a lot about community and getting buy-in.
Yeah.
And talking to people. It's a very social project.
Yep. So at least in our case, the grant helped get the faculty's attention, because hey, this is the National Science Foundation. That's something that catches their attention. But one time at an engineering education conference, I was asked by somebody, one of these working groups had 25 people in it. And they said, I don't have 25 people in my department. How can I do something that size? And I said, you don't understand. I have that many people in the group so that I get buy-in. I would much rather this would have been a much easier project with 10 or 15 people than it would have been with 120. It's like turning an aircraft carrier. So I think in some ways, much smaller departments could do this more easily without the external injection of cash. That was just an attention getter. So,
I would say, though, in terms of time is money, we meet every Wednesday morning at 8:30 for an hour for 5 to 6 years. And so you have to figure out a way to take something else out of people's time, because that's just the meeting. And we all know meetings just make more work, right? So there's that time and labor that needs to be, visible and compensated for if it's going to be sustainable too.
And the grant helps with the external advice. Your own department can be pretty myopic about change, whereas the external consultants, team members are really pushing you to be more aggressive in the change.
Can I add to that? As someone who works across the entire university, across colleges, across all departments, it's not lost on me that the leadership behind all of this was also fully on board and supportive. And I think what Luke has modeled as a leader in this process, and the way that he has encouraged his faculty, the way that he's supported his faculty in doing this work, as Lisa said, something else had to go. This was a lot of work for them. And his commitment to the shift in culture That's not easy to do, Luke. That's not lost on me, and hopefully not
Okay,
lost on
great.
others, right? I know it's
Thank
been
you
a
for the
rough road.
help. Yeah.
So Tim, I think to answer your question from my perspective is a lot of this has to do with leadership, not necessarily money, right? So I appreciate Luke in that sense.
Agreed.
Thanks. We have time for maybe one more?
Jamie McReynolds, was there any interviewing of employers on the fan-out process in terms of this versus, say, traditional ECE programs at other universities?
I'm sorry, interviewing of who?
Of employers, you know, in terms of fanning out?
Yeah. So we certainly talked to our industrial advisory board. Very early on in the process, we started making part of our meetings with them involve around RED. We talked to alumni, particularly those who'd gone on to different paths, even under the old program. The other thing that we did was, like I said, it was a data-driven process. We looked at what our aspirational peers were doing with their programs. That structure that's up there isn't something we came up with on our own. It looks a lot like if you take a couple of those programs that we looked at, it looks a lot like those. So.
That was a pleasant surprise. The alumni were really into the early stages of this grant in terms of the revisions and the push and the validation for the faculty that, oh, look, the people who are, you know, the future employers of our students are saying we should do this. And you know, real quick, I would go to the first meeting after the grant started. I started talking about the curriculum that hadn't changed in a long time. And they started naming the numbers of the courses and the titles of the 1989 curriculum, as I call it. And I was like, wait, when did you graduate? 1990 came up. So you know, they were really into it. So that was one of the pleasant surprises. You know, things that we didn't see coming, well, that was one of the very positive things, is our alumni engagement.
We are at time, so I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you, team, for presenting this morning. Thank you to the tech crew to keep us all going as well. So good work to everybody. I hope the rest of your day is fabulous, and you have a great weekend. We'll be back next week, same time, same place.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks for that.